Welcome to Working for Women, the Independent Women's Forum podcast, where we are changing the conversation about women and public policy for the better.
Hi, I'm Julie Gunlock with the Independent Women's Forum. Thank you for listening in on the latest podcast. Today we have Kavin Senapathy, a mother of two and a writer who focuses on parenting and science. She writes for multiple publications, including Slate, Grounded Parents, and the Genetic Literacy Project, as well as Gawker. She is the co-founder of March Against Myths, which is an organization that seeks to promote facts about science, specifically biotechnology and other agriculture issues. Kavin has also written a new book. I'm very excited about this, called The Fear Babe, Shattering Vani Hari's Glass House. It's due out in October. Kavin, I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
I am equally excited. Thank you for having me.
I want to talk about your book, and I want to talk also about this letter that I've signed on, Moms for GMOs. But first, if you could kind of give us a sense of what got you into this sort of area of writing, why you focus on this issue, what got you started on this, and tell us a little bit about your education and your background.
Right. So I've always had an interest in science. I'm not a scientist, and my education is not in science. Actually, my undergrad was in English literature. But I grew up with a molecular biologist as a father, and always just had this natural love of genetics and biology. And with that kind of passion, after I had my daughter, who's now 4.5, my first child, I had those anxieties that all new parents have. And of course, I started looking on the internet. And the internet, I think of as sort of the wild, wild west of information. And you have to sift through it and find what's right. But it's so easy to get caught up in what's frightening and get surrounded by hype, as you know, with culture of alarmism. So I've also always loved writing. So I started writing for Grounded Parents, which is an evidence-based parenting website, and I just started exploring issues around food when the GMO issue popped up, and I got started getting all this information. And I was trying to figure out what's true. And I just dived in with great interest and really started focusing on biotechnology, although I explore all aspects of science-based parenting, and I also like to write about health, cancer, disease, autism, but biotechnology is kind of my sweet spot.
Yeah, it's so interesting because that's almost my exact story. When I'm on the other side of this and I'm the one being interviewed and people say, "How did you get into this?" That's almost exactly what I say. And the reason I was motivated was because I was astonished at the number of things I was being told would kill my kid. And I'm not talking about like tornadoes and like hurricanes and escaped convicts. I mean like their pacifier and their crib sheets and the food I was feeding them. It was just a constant barrage of really scary information. I've talked about this many, many times before, but IWF did some polling on this, and it was so depressing to see how moms are really overwhelmed by this information. But what the polling also showed is this hunger for legitimate information and trusted information. Do you think that women are finding good sources? I mean, look, you and I, we write about people like Dr. Oz. We know that these guys are charlatans and that they are profiting off fear. Are science writers, are people who focus on these issues and try to get out accurate information, are they making a dent?
I want to say that people like us are making a dent. Now, the problem is, as you say, there's a hunger for accurate and evidence-based and science-based information. But the problem is it's very easy for these charlatans to make what they're putting out there in terms of articles or YouTube videos or TV shows like Dr. Oz's to make it sound very science-y, for lack of a better term. I believe that the average mom or average parent that's looking for information on the internet will definitely run across this kind of quackery in their search for good information, and sometimes it's just really hard to sift through the quality evidence-based stuff in the sea of misinformation. But the important thing is that we're talking about not only what information is correct and why, but also that we explain, give people a foundation or a framework as to how to evaluate the information in the articles that they're reading to make sure that they're legitimate.
So let's talk a little bit. You are well known for taking on one of the sort of famous alarmists, the food babe. For those listening who are not familiar with Vani Hari, who is a sort of a well-known activist, she certainly presents herself as having expertise in the area of nutrition and science, yet she has absolutely no background in these issues. She's a computer science major. And frankly, I'm like you. I don't have a science background, but what I do is refer to the scientists when I write on these issues. I don't spout off that I'm an expert on these issues. I refer people to who is actually the experts on it. She doesn't do that. She says, she puts out her opinion and she presents it as she's an expert, and she's warning you. Really, she's sort of this consumer advocate, sort of a Ralph Nader type, telling you that this particular kind of food is going to harm you. You took her on. You're well known for taking her on. I think you're so brave on Twitter and in other social media platforms. How much does your book explore her? And also, I know that you also focus a lot on biotech. So tell me a little bit about the book and how much of these issues it explores.
Absolutely. So the co-authors of my book, I'm one of three co-authors. The other two I like to call the Marks, Mark Draco and Mark Alsip. We explore a lot about the psychology of why people latch on to people like Food Babe / Vani Hari, and also other charlatans like her. And we also explore point by point the majority of the claims that she's made on her blog and in her videos and in her recent New York Times best-selling book, The Food Babe Way. We'll take her claims on, say, stevia and break them down, or take her claims on caramel color, break them down, or on GMOs and break them down. The main problem with Food Babe, and you say, you and I don't have extensive science backgrounds, but we refer people to evidence-based information. We refer people to scientists, which is exactly what we should be doing. But what Vani Hari does is she says, listen, I'm referring people to scientists too. I'm referring people to physician information too. But what she does is she cherry picks those kind of outlier scientists, the ones that are kind of fringe scientists who put out cherry-picked one-off papers that don't agree with the vast weight of evidence. And she says, see, such and such, Dr. such and such supports what I'm saying. And so that becomes very hard for the average person to sift through. They'll say, see, she's using science too. But what these people don't understand is that when there are thousands of studies all concluding the same thing, and then there are two studies that are in opposition to that vast weight of evidence, that's not how you make a valid conclusion. So
right.
And we address that in the book as well.
Okay, great. And the thing is I think that's a huge part of the problem. As you just said, if you have 700 studies that say one thing, and then you have two studies over here that say something different. We've seen that, for instance, with Bamsal and some other on the GMO issue, where you have the weight of evidence clearly states that GMOs are perfectly safe, and then you have a few outliers that don't, and often those, well, not often, every time those studies you're not able to repeat. They're not able, they might not be peer reviewed, or they're not able to replicate their findings. And so in the scientific world, this is sort of, that's not a really good study. But to activist organizations and anti-GMO organizations, that doesn't matter. And so often that is not reported. And so that's in the nitty-gritty of science, sort of science communications. Like a lot of, sort of the average person doesn't know that a study has to sort of go through this rigorous checking in order to be a respected study. That's often lost, I think, on this debate, or really when a lot of the alarmists and when there's a lot of fear mongering about these issues, they don't mention the quality of the study that they're citing.
Absolutely. There's the saying, especially on the skeptical side of the internet, that is citation or get out. So people say, someone makes a claim and someone will say, oh, I need a citation, and if there isn't one, then I'm not listening to your argument. But there's even a fundamental problem with that, because a citation of one study does not necessarily corroborate a claim, and like you said, that's lost on a lot of people, and that's what's important about the type of communication that we're doing. Is we're not only communicating about specific claims or specific people that are trying to public figures that are trying to pull the wool over the public's eyes. We also have to continually explain these concepts, because no matter how many times you do it, it's as if you're battling a hydra. You cut off one head and there's plenty more. So it's an ongoing struggle, but I think it's one that's very worthwhile.
I'm wondering if you could tell me, and I do want to get back to your book and Vani Harry, but I'm wondering if you can address something that comes up quite a bit, and we're talking about scientific studies. One having to do with GMOs that I often see pop up a couple times a year. I'll see this pop up again in my Facebook feed, the Seralini study.
Yes.
And Genetic Roulette, which was, I think I'm getting that right, which was a documentary that came out a couple years ago that I believe referred to the Seralini study. If you could you give our listeners, I think this is a good example of one of those studies. So you have thousands of studies that have shown GMOs to be perfectly safe. There's not one nutritional difference between GMO food and conventional and organic. They are processed by the human body in the same way. They are in no way going to harm the human body. And yet, then you have these other studies, and I think the Seralini study is the one that pops up the most. Can you talk about that one a little bit?
Sure, and there's actually another recent study that we won't get into today, but if people are interested, the Ayadure study, a systems biology study that claims that GMO soy has dangerous levels of formaldehyde compared to non-GMO soy.
Is this the Fran Drescher?
The Fran Drescher's husband one. And so I'll just throw that out there if anyone wants to Google it, since I know you wanted to talk about Seralini. And so I'll just give
really quickly, before you go into Seralini, I want to be clear. This is Fran Drescher's husband, who's at MIT. Is that correct? He's at MIT.
Right, and that's what gives him the credibility that he doesn't deserve. Yes. And I've written about this extensively. If anyone wants to just look on Genetic Literacy Project for my article on that, it explains the whole thing on why this isn't valid and why it's. I mean, truly, we're laughing, and it is laughable to some extent.
It really is. So that's so. I just wanted to be clear. It's good background. Check that one out if you're interested. But go on with the Seralini.
Yeah, so Seralini, I'll just give the very high-level gist of it, and I'm sure that a lot of listeners have seen this kind of famous image of tumor-ridden white rats. They look absolutely miserable. They're suffering. Their bodies are just full of tumors. And what this study basically says is that, or is trying to say, it doesn't say this, that rats fed GMOs develop cancer, and he tries to imply, and his followers try to say that this shows that GMOs are dangerous and will cause cancer and other diseases. Now the problem is that in that picture, you don't see the control rat, the rat that wasn't fed the GMOs, which would also have been riddled with tumors. Now the problem is the breed of rat that was used, and also the length of time of the study. This rat is prone to tumors, and if you prolong its lifespan and under other certain conditions, confounding factors, it is very likely to develop tumors, and that's the kind of gist as to why the sad picture truly doesn't really tell you the whole story.
The interesting thing is, though, is that the Ciarlini study caused, first of all, he put this really weird video up on YouTube with creepy horror music, sort of, creaking coffins and spooky music, and then showed these horrifying, like you say, these horrifying images of tumor-ridden rats. And so it was sort of a spectacle, and this caused huge panic. Am I right, Kavin, that was it Kenya or some African nation based on the Ciarlini study banned the import and use of GMOs in the country? And it had, I believe it was Kenya, and there were many other. I think there was some concern among European countries. I think for a temporary time, I think there was a ban in some European countries that was even more strict than they are today. And they backed that off now because Ciarlini's study has not been peer-reviewed. He will not release his data. It hasn't been peer-reviewed, and he refuses to really be upfront about the methods he used. Again, we know that this particular type of rat is prone to tumors, and we know that his methodology was not very good. But there were some real reverberations. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Not only policy reverberations, which are consequences which are huge, but it still has an effect on the public psyche. You mentioned that I'm a co-founder of March Against Myths, and at our big event this year, where we counter-protested against a march against Monsanto at our chapters worldwide, we had some conversations with people who were on the anti-GMO March Against Monsanto side. And when we could manage to have, to catch someone who was willing to have a civil conversation, we asked them, why are you doing this? Why are you marching? And the Ciarlini study would come up, GMOs cause cancer. You saw those rats, right?
Yeah.
And so we would try to explain. It's very hard to reach people at these marches, although it was the online fence sitters that we were really trying to sway through this. But it's just interesting how often this continues to come up.
Yeah, well, this is a good time to actually talk about the Moms for GMO letter that you have put together and that you are managing and getting other moms. I am a signer of this letter. If you could tell us a little bit about it and what you're trying to accomplish with this letter.
Absolutely. So the letter actually started when I and three other women who originally signed the letter got together, and we saw that celebrity moms, including Gwyneth Paltrow and Sarah Michelle Gellar, and a lot of these moms who signed the letter are big fans of these celebrities, were speaking out against GMOs and for mandatory GMO labeling. And we realized all of them are moms, and they're all doing this out of a legitimate concern for their children. But the problem is that they have so much clout, they have a huge platform,
right.
Yet clearly they're misinformed. And so the four of us got together and decided that we would write an open letter to them. And so that's what we did, the Moms for GMOs letter, in which we really do highlight what we have in common with these women is that we're all share concern for our children. Our children, I can speak for all of us, are the most important things to us. That's kind of what we are concerned about 24/7.
And it's our strength and our weakness, to be honest.
Right.
I think that is why alarmists are so successful, and why Vani Hari and Dr. Oz. Because look, there's a self-preservation point about the safety of your children. I think it would destroy me if my child was ever harmed. So I think we become very, we are very, very nervous about these things, but it sometimes it impedes us from being sort of rational about stuff.
Right.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I agree.
No, that's okay. And it even sometimes can backfire. When you're overly cautious. I like to model. I want my kids to be physically safe and healthy, but I also want them to grow up as rational, critical thinkers. And I think it's very important, at least for me personally, to model that critical thinking for them. So that's another reason that I do this. Although my kids are just 4 and 2 now, they're gonna soon start noticing. Our mom and dad really worried about this thing, and why are they worried? And I don't want them to be constantly concerned. Now, the thing about the Moms for GMOs letter is that the combination of celebrity and motherhood together is very powerful, I believe, in the public eye. People see, people see them, they listen to them, but they also motherhood gives a credibility. So people think, these women are putting out this information. The information sounds legitimate, and of course they're worried about their kids, and so we should listen to them because we're worried about our kids too. And so and that misinformation again, the way they say it, and they put out a video, public service announcement sponsored by an organization called Just Label It, for what's called the Conceal or Reveal campaign. It's a campaign pushing for mandatory GMO labeling and against the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act. And when these celebrities frame it as a right issue, we have a right to know what's in our food. Well, then if we oppose a legitimate right, then it sounds like the Moms for GMOs or pro-GMO camp are doing something inherently unethical. Why would we oppose a right? But the point the letter makes is that there isn't a right to know. A GMO, GM is a process. It's not an ingredient. And if we start labeling process-based things, then there's so many other processes that we would need in terms of logic, and then it increases prices and further it doesn't make scientific sense because there are so many different ways, different plant breeding methods that manipulate an organism's genome that isn't considered GMO in terms of the modern lexicon.
Yeah, it's really interesting too. In the letter, you mention another kind of I guess plant breeding where they take a living thing, a plant, and they blast it with massive doses of radiation and see what comes out. And I can't remember the name of that process. Yeah, that's one I like to talk about because it really shows how arbitrary the term GMO is. Initially I really didn't like the term GMO because it is so scientifically arbitrary, but because it's so ubiquitous, I figured we might as well spin it in a positive way. So that's why we did the Moms for GMOs hashtag. But so the process you're talking about is called radiation mutagenesis. And then there's also a process called chemical mutagenesis. Moms out there should feel really fine about mutagenesis. I mean, that is a scary
and the interesting thing is mutagenic varieties can be sold as organic. A very ubiquitous one is wheat. There is no wheat on the market that is considered GMO wheat. There's no wheat that's considered GMO. Although I would say that a lot of this wheat is very much genetically altered. And so what scientists do in labs, or plant breeders do in labs, is they bombard certain plants or seed with radiation with the intent of scrambling the genome and with the intent of inducing changes in the traits of that organism. And usually what happens, I like to compare it to rolling the dice. And you keep rolling the dice and hoping to get a good roll. So most of the time, no discernible change happens through this process. sometimes a negative change happens, and that's kind of discarded. And every now and then you might get lucky and get a beneficial change in trait, after which that variety is developed and then commercialized and then marketed. And again,
then they put an organic sticker on it, and then it can be sold for 14 times the amount.
Yeah. Gourmet wheat pasta, right. And it can be organic. And I mean, it can be sold as conventional, but it can be grown in an organic, under the organic certification process, and it can be sold as an organic. And there's so many other methods like this that force, just in terms of how GMO is defined, which again I find arbitrary, so many other processes like this that are genetically manipulating the organism that are considered non-GMO.
Well, it is really sad too, and this is a point that I make a lot in my writing, is that sort of this moms, the celebrity moms that are against GMOs, they don't so subtly suggest that if you're a really good mom or if you care about your mom, then you'll keep them away from GMOs. And this is very similar to the narrative about organic food. I am on a very strict budget as a mom of 3 boys who are growing. I'm trying to stop them from growing, but they keep growing, and their appetites are growing. And my budget is just, I bought one of those super packs of pork chops the other night, and there's like 1 pork chop left. I couldn't believe it. Mm-hmm. They are eating so much. And so I'm on a strict budget, and what makes me sad, though, is I don't live at or under the poverty line. And I think about women who do, and who might listen to, Gwyneth Paltrow, go to Blog Her and say, organic. I actually don't know if she said this at Blog Her, but we know that she is a big promoter of organic food and sort of boutique eating, and how they must feel pressure to use their very scarce resources on very expensive food. And so one thing that I just feel like a part of what you're doing is not just advocacy for agriculture and biotechnology and farmers. I feel like you're advocating really for moms who struggle. And there are a lot of moms in this country who struggle, moms and dads and families that struggle, especially in this economy. And so I think hitting back, I think this letter is so critical because, again, yes, we're trying to reassure women about a particular food technology, but I think it really goes deeper than that. And I think the work that you're doing is so important for women who struggle to feed their families.
Right. I really do agree with that. And I write a lot about the concept of mom shaming that happens. Like you said, the implication or even the explicit declaration that moms who don't choose organic or who choose to vaccinate their kids or who there are so many other choices that moms are shamed for and are guilted for that we just really need to push back against, because as long as you love your child, you feed your child a balanced diet, and no, it doesn't need to be organic, and it doesn't matter if there's GMOs in it, but yeah, you want to feed your child a healthy, balanced diet, and you pay attention to them and care about their education. And that's what really matters. It doesn't matter if we breastfeed them for 3 years or if we and we should vaccinate them. Feeding them GMOs isn't killing them. But I get so much backlash from people who tell me, oh, you're poisoning your kids or you're hurting them, and so. I think that's very important.
And there's a lot of cruelty out there to people who do make evidence and science-based decisions when it comes to rearing children. I think there's a lot of nervous parents out there, and there are things. I think that anti-alarmists or science writers aren't saying that the world is wonderful and there's nothing you have to worry about. There are things to worry about. What's so sad, though, is often these distract people from the true things that they should be doing. Your child is probably going to turn out great because you paid attention to them and you loved them and you read to them and you set them out to be free and have free play. These are the things that matter. Too often, I think women and moms are so wrapped up in little things like, oh, does this have the organic label, that they miss sort of the bigger things that matter to kids. Kevin, I'm so thrilled to talk to you. I'm a huge fan of everything that you do. I can't wait. I cannot wait to buy your book. Is there pre-ordering or advanced ordering, or when does it come out? Tell us a little bit more about your book, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, there's no advanced ordering yet, but it's due out in October. And we're just three authors that got together and decided to write this book, and it ended up getting a lot bigger than we planned. In a good way, my husband was reading it, and his short review, because he's not very wordy. He says it's really good. I like it. It's dense. He goes, it's dense. It's not for the casual reader.
Well, the good thing is I've read your stuff, and you're very funny. So I think to any of the listeners here, yes, this is probably going to be thick on science, and you're going to delve into some pretty complicated issues, but I do know that you are very lighthearted. You have a lighthearted sense of humor, and look, there is no better person to make fun of than the humorless Vani Hari. So I'm sure. I'm sure there'll be some fun moments in the book.
I guarantee that you'll laugh out loud, and you will be one of the first to know when it's available. It'll be available on Amazon and all other major online retailers.
Great. I look for it. I will definitely be promoting it on IWF site, and I'd love to write a review of it, because I think this is really, really important stuff. So let us know as soon as.
Okay. I'll send you a review copy.
Oh, well, I feel super. No, that's awesome. I feel super important.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, listen, Kavin, you are fantastic. Please check out everything she writes at Genetic Literacy Project, at Grounded Parents. And you also have a very active Facebook page under, it's Kavin, and then your last name is Senapathy. Is that correct?
Yep. If you search my name, you'll find it. Don't confuse my personal page, which is very boring, with my public page, which is Kavin Senapathy, Kavin Senapathy, writer, science defender. So you'll see it there.
That's right. And you have sort of it's a picture, it's a cartoon of you wielding a sword with the word science on it, correct?
Yes, my dear cousin made that cartoon of me, so it's me with the science sword.
Yes. Well, you're a superhero to us, and thank you so much for being on, and thanks to all of our listeners for listening to another podcast from the Independent Women Forum.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, or stop by IWF.org for similar content.